Welcome everyone to this webinar for Memphasys Limited, ASX code MEM. Shortly, I'll introduce Memphasys Managing Director Alison Coutts, who will provide a comprehensive overview of the Memphasys business and an update of the company's diverse product suite. During the presentation, attendees will have the opportunity to pose questions to Alison, as well as Director of Operations Hassan Bakos, Director of Business Development David Ali, and Scientific Director Professor John Aitken during product focus Q&A. So what we're going to do is we are going to go through the presentation reasonably quickly and stop at the salient points so we can get right into Q&A. That's what everyone's here for. So that's what we will be doing. So let's get started. I'd now like to introduce Memphasys Managing Director, Alison Coutts. Alison, over to you.
Thanks, David. Thank you all for listening. I'll get straight into the presentation because time is short. And as David said, I will be going through this quite rapidly because we want to leave lots of time for Q&A. We released this not so long ago, and so it's available on our website and on the ASX platform. So Memphasys, it's all about better technology, more life. Why Memphasys? We've got 4 key points here. I'll let you read the slide, but these are all very, very pertinent why you would choose Memphasys. Next. John Aitken, who is here, he's our scientific director. If you do a Google search, you'll find him cited everywhere. He is absolutely global leading light in reproductive biology, and we're very lucky to have him. He's the source of our new product ideas. He works at the University of Newcastle, and he has a great team of researchers with him. We're all set for growth. We've got all the requisite bits that you would require. You can see the slide. We're ready for forging ahead. So I don't really need to go into this. The pipeline, we've got 4 key activities, 3 products we've put into the slide pack for now. They're all quite comprehensive, really. Don't plan to go in depth at any one product. It's there for you to read. It's pretty easy reading. But you'll see, just looking down, we've got the Felix device for sperm separation. We've got Rockstar, which is the antioxidant assessment. There are 4 actually assays. They're quite unique. Past proof of concept at the university now in prototyping. AI Port is an AI product for beef cattle initially, but can be applied to other species. And in the background at the university, there's media development. And as you see along the right, there's various stages of development of all these products. And a couple of them we've identified as an early access for markets, and then there is more highly regulated. So that's the sort of like the general view of what we've got in the portfolio. We have a portfolio because we don't want to have all eggs in one basket. It makes sense to have a number of products in the pipeline, and particularly when you've got somebody like John Aitken there, who's a wealth of product ideas, more than ideas, a lifetime of research, and it's an ideal opportunity for us to put a lot of that into products. So just talking about why fertility, well, in humans at least, the global fertility is just massively decreasing. Since you can see the graph on the right-hand side, 1960, it's gone down to half. And there's a lot of reasons. You need to buy John's book, really, for understanding a lot of those reasons. We're not here to answer the whys and wherefores, but maybe to also help in the way of like, what can we do for male infertility in particular, because the males account for about half the problems in infertility. And that's where our Felix device comes in. So, and as I said, there's nothing actually new in the sperm processing area for the last 40 years. And ours is a dramatic departure from that. It's really novel. Where are the big regions for IVF? It's Asia, Europe, and North America. And have a look at Asia, how it's growing. The last little while, it's surpassing the other 2 markets. We have a presence in all those 3 markets, and in particular, Asia of late, and within there, Japan, and also China. So coming on. Next one. A little bit about how this works. 2 things. It's about the negative charge on the sperm, which indicates good DNA. Won't go into the science of that. You can ask John anytime. And we have size exclusion membranes to make sure that the sperm are kept away from the electrodes, and only those the right size get put into the harvest chamber, and the other bits and pieces, the things that you don't want, are left behind. Next one. So this is the look of our device. It's a very, very neat thing. It's uses a different process entirely, nothing like it on the market. Electrophoresis. It's easy, 6 minutes, single-use, disposable cartridges. That's a recurrent revenue source. It's one step. It's all automated. It's virtually operator independent. So anybody who can use a pipette can use this. And the other great thing is that can handle a wide range of samples, whereas the other techniques are limited in what they can handle. Next one. So there's a raft of publications that as a body of evidence gathering about how good Felix is compared with the other processes. The other processes being density gradient centrifuge and swim up, which are laborious. They take at least half an hour each. They're multi-step, and they're not great. You know, they each have their pluses and minuses, but Felix is quite a departure from those and has unique attributes, great benefits over them. And in the middle, you'll see that we had first normal live birth with ICSI, this is in India, with our Felix, and subsequently at the most recent Aspire conference, that one has turned into 11 live births. And all of these were from guys who were suffering from enormous sperm DNA fragmentation, a 34% average, when actually over 20 is considered high. And that's a known factor for infertility. And all these couples were at least second timers and sometimes more trying IVF. A very, very hard patient cohort to deal with, and the Indians are overjoyed with the results. Next slide, please. So I just talked about this, very, very nice statistics, really good considering the cohort that we were dealing with. It was, you know, the first fellow had 80% DNA fragmentation. It's almost unheard of. He would have been absolutely a candidate for testicular biopsy, and then they'd be lucky to find some. So, you know, great result. Next one. So early access markets, this is a high-reg product generally, certainly in Australia, we've got to have TGA approval. In America, it's FDA. In Europe, it's CE mark. China, it's their own regulator, etc. But these three markets are early access markets for us, 31 million in total, mostly Japan. I'm not saying 31 million is the total for all IVF, but that's what we say is accessible to us. And as I said, Japan is the big one. And the beautiful thing is that we're already selling in Japan, and I'll talk about that in a minute. A distribution agreement with Vitrolife, a major in the sector, and we are also working now on opening up New Zealand and Canada, where there's possibilities for also doing sales. Next one. On Vitrolife, we signed an exclusive distribution agreement with them for distributing Felix in Japan. Dave Ali, our business development director, will talk about that later. This is really great. We've known them for years. It's taken a long time. They've been watching us, been very comfortable along the way, seeing the early results and the more and more proof of concept and proof. Actually, they've seen the live births now, and they're highly excited. And so they're seeding the market in Japan, and we've provided them the first lot, and you know, they're looking at their best first half dozen clinics to go out from there to ultimately get to the whole market. We'll talk about how we're doing that in the Q&A. So next one. So for regulated markets, Australia's one of them. India now, it never used to be until mid last year. Europe, China, and USA. We've got a strategy for each, and people will probably realise that we're over halfway in a clinical trial with Monash IVF for Felix. That's going well from you know, what we've seen so far, but we'd like the recruitment rate to come up for one particular arm, which is in the slides. Everything else is going according to plan, but it's a highly regulated market in a sense, and it just takes time. Next. So talking about Monash IVF and that trial, 95% of the swim up arms complete, DGC arms quarter way through. We've added another site for DGC. We're looking for whatever way we can improve that DGC recruitment. And based on what we see for now, this is, TGA, we get it over to TGA sometime, by sort of Q4 24 results, all that. And then the TGA will take a while to look at it and hopefully approve it. And then when you get TGA approval, it's not just for Australia, but it opens up a whole lot of markets in Southeast Asia, Middle East, etc. TGA holds a lot of sway internationally. Next one. So we're up to the Q&A. So I'd like to open it up for Q&A.
Thanks, Alison. We do have quite a lot of questions, and we will direct them as required to the relevant personnel who are there. A number have come in prior to the webinar commencing, so we'll jump into those first. David, can the company disclose what, if any, minimum yearly sales are for Vitrolife as a distributor to sell the Felix system in Japan? As an exclusive distributor, what incentive do they have to sell?
Well, let me start with the incentive to sell, David. And I think that we have a signed exclusive agreement with Vitrolife in Japan. And the incentive to sell basically comes from the fact that the Felix device and the other devices and products that we have to offer actually fill a gap within the Vitrolife product portfolio. So, from a sales perspective, there's a huge incentive for them to sell the products that they take from Memphasys. In terms of sales, and my extensive experience in pharma, one of the standard operating procedures that are routinely adopted really evolves around the development of advocacy when you're trying to open up a new market. And that's basically to get the buy-in from the key opinion leaders in a particular therapy area. And Vitrolife are basically following the same process. So they're looking at discussions with key opinion leaders and engaging those key opinion leaders. And in fact, their plan is in the short term now to engage key opinion leaders from the 10 largest clinics in Japan before they engage the rest of the market. And typically that's the way that companies would operate and enter new markets. And they're doing that in a staged manner as well. So the first will be 5 of the major clinics and then a second 5. In terms of the sales, we've had a 3 or 4 month time with Vitrolife, and we're approaching now a review of the strategy and financial reviews with Vitrolife, and we're looking forward to that in the next coming weeks. And when we look at new markets such as Canada and New Zealand, we currently have a few clinics in New Zealand who are testing the Felix device, and we're getting some positive feedback from those clinics. But Canada, as a new open market, we've had a lot of interest from a number of distributors in that market, and Vitrolife as well are highly interested in the North American market with us, and we will be discussing the potential of looking at how we can enter that market at the ASRM conference in mid-October in America. So, I think we're well on track in terms of developing future sales through Vitrolife and any other distributors that we engage.
David, it probably was a little bit remiss of me not to sort of ask the question, which has been asked, thankfully, was your own experience in developing a product and taking a product into market similar to Felix. What's your experience, and how confident and comfortable are you with the sales approach that Memphasys is taking here with Felix?
Look, I think there's 2 aspects to this, David. Firstly, I think the people need to recognise the development process. You can't put a product out into market that's not properly tested and is safe to use. Secondly, in terms of getting it out to market, you use the data that you've developed within that process of testing and rigorous testing, not only from a company's perspective, but from regulatory perspective as well, which takes time and money. And you then use that and you apply that to develop key advocacies with a variety of key opinion leaders in the market. And once that's done and you've seeded the market, which is what we're currently doing with Japan, you then open yourself up, because you need to create a high degree of confidence in the market about a new product, especially something that's a predicate, a device such as the Felix. And I think that we're well on our way to doing that. And certainly this is the same sort of process that we used in pharma. So, we basically would take a new product, develop advocacy, and then move it out into the general medical community. And there's a high degree of confidence from a variety of physicians and clinicians that if people up in the higher echelons are saying it's a good device or it's a good drug, I can tell you now that the physicians further down the chain will use it.
And just staying on Japan, the question I've got is Japan has moved quickly to help with IVF regarding insurance. Due to this, Memphasys has been limited to private clinics. Do we have a time frame for getting this covered by insurance? And would the statement that insurance would save large sums of money by using the Felix because families would need less cycles be correct? So it would be an incentive for the Japanese government to look favourably on Felix.
Yeah, look, I think there's a huge incentive for everybody in using Felix, and certainly from a government perspective and a payee perspective, there's a huge benefit simply because it's a very cost-effective system when you think of the potential success rate with Felix. And I mean, let's not just talk about the payees and the government. Let's also bring the patients into this as well, because they're actually the focus of this. And certainly they can benefit highly from achieving live births in a minimum period of time. So I think it's a win-win for everybody in the community.
And I'm not shying away from asking any of the hard questions, so I'm going to throw them at you. What happened, David, to the fast track for Felix reg approval in China?
Look, we're still engaged in that process, David, and the fast track doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, we have to take into consideration that, within the context of any approval and regulatory process, they're all rigorous, no matter what jurisdiction you're trying to enter. And not only are they rigorous, but they're also time consuming. So we're still going through the process. We're providing documentation. We're looking at doing further testing, satisfy their standards and our standards, and to make sure that we meet all the right regulatory standards before we enter that market. And these are things that just have to be done. And unfortunately, it's a due process, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it to either speed it up to make it happen tomorrow, but it will happen.
Thank you. Now, Hassan, I've got a question for you. So over to you if possible. Just in regards to the Monash trial, will adding another clinic be enough to get DGC numbers up in relation to the Monash trial?
Sure. Look, adding the site will certainly help, and that's why we've gone down that strategy. So we expect the numbers to increase as a result. But concurrent with that, we're also exploring other options, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that the numbers for DGC are increased as soon as practically possible.
Now, one other question, but before I do, again, I probably should have, I've got another reminder here from someone watching that I should have introduced Hassan better. Obviously, having an extensive experience with Monash IVF previously, what's your experience, but what attracted you to Memphasys?
Yeah, look, I worked with Monash IVF for 17 years prior to joining Memphasys here. I had first-hand experience with the device because I was actually working on the other side with Monash, trialing the device in its very early stages. And what attracted me to Memphasys is that I saw the potential of the Felix device and also the pipeline that Memphasys has in terms of its product development. And I saw a huge, opportunity for Memphasys to make a difference in patient experience and improving outcomes for patients who are suffering from infertility.
Now, given your background, you're probably the most suited to answer this question because it's highly technical and in fairness has gone probably straight over my head. In relation to the 27.5% live birth rate in India, which was disclosed in an ASX announcement just recently, with men that had high levels of sperm fragmentation, the company compared the success to the average IVF birth rates in Australia. How does it compare to IVF birth rates of high fragmentation?
Yeah, sure. Look, we made this comparison deliberately because we thought it was an outstanding result, because we were comparing it to the general IVF population, if you like. However, with a population that we actually looked at in India, where they've had repeated failed cycles essentially, and also very high DNA fragmentation, the literature would suggest that in the population we suggested using the standard sperm separation methods, live birth rates could be in the teens as low as 13%. So for us to achieve very close result to the actual general IVF population, we believe this is actually an outstanding result.
Thank you. Now, Alison, I've got a couple for you now that you've got your breath. So I'll throw a couple at you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Big question. What's happening in India? Will Memphasys manufacture there? Are the early access paths? What is the situation in India?
Yeah, so it's been a moving ball since the 9th of August when the regulator changed the regulations. Initially, we thought we would be fine. It was unclear to everybody what the regulations meant, and they've been evolving ever since. It's never been an absolutely clear, crystal clear picture, and we've worked with them as they've evolved. Initially, we thought we could maybe, well, actually, we thought we would be able to sell because we're already selling. We had ISO 13485. That was our regulatory advice. We should be fine. No. So then we thought, okay, well, we could actually manufacture there and have it kind of like Indian made. But then recent was, well, that's going to be problematic because the components that you'll be importing come from another device. You haven't got TGA approval for the device here. So, and that was a surprise, but yeah, I can see that. So we've looked at what else we can do. This is a very, very important market for us. It's a really, really growing market. We've got 3 clinics that really want the device, and you know, it's very upsetting we can't supply anymore. It's a temporary thing. So certainly when the TGA comes on through, yes, we will be open slather, we can supply, but we want to get in there before that. So the latest advice is that maybe that we may be able to get some small quantities through by doing a kind of like a test sub patient populations for those 3 clinics, and so we're looking at that.
Question for you in terms of costs. There's a question here: pipeline development costs versus impact on revenue and singular focus.
Yeah. Okay. So we've purposely developed a pipeline. We're more akin to a CSL, I suppose, than a Cochlear or a ResMed one product. We don't want to be one product company, one shot at goal. Why would we? A pipeline, a diversified pipeline, attracts a diversified customer and investor base, and it also diversifies risk. And then we've got John Aitken there, who is just an absolute legend in the space. He's just full of the ability to supply us with unique value-adding pipeline products, and that's what we're doing as fast as we possibly can. And each one of the products that we've got here, the 3 of them, I would say if these come off, they could be company building in their own right. So look, I'm very comfortable with where we're going. It's a purposeful strategy, and I would say ultimately, same as like CSL, where they've got a whole pipeline and they've got giant revenues and profits, and they haven't spent a lot on R&D, but the spend on R&D is a fraction of what their profits are, and that's where I would want us to go as well. There are multiples that we could potentially make in profits on what we're spending on research, just that the front end is research heavy. Bear in mind, Tesla has had a lot of failed cars, and there've been a lot of failed rockets as well. But you know, this is how you have to do in order to get a pipeline of massive value-adding products.
Now, I've got one question for John. I noticed I've had him sitting there for a little bit, and as Alison mentioned, John is the rock star. But John, I've got one question before we move on, which, as Dev has mentioned, is a basic question, but I think a good question. What is the problem with the damaged sperm in reproductive process?
What is the problem with damaged sperm in reproduction? Well, there are two major problems with it. First of all, of course, conception depends on there being little damage to the sperm cells. So if you want high fertilization rates, you have to be able to select cells that have high levels of functional competence, that they're good cells at fertilization. And the other issue, which is very important, and the reason why we emphasize a lot the ability of Felix to select sperm cells that have low levels of DNA damage, is because high levels of DNA damage impacts not just the occurrence of pregnancy, but the health and well-being of the offspring. More and more children are now being produced by IVF. It didn't matter so much when it was a little cottage industry responsible for less than 1% of all live births, but in some countries, it's now more than 10% of all births are due to IVF. In Australia, it's nearly 7% of all live births are due to IVF. So you want your procedures not just to be efficient, but you also need them to be safe, in the sense that there is no risk to the health and the well-being of the offspring. They are normal babies that will have a normal life trajectory. So those are the two elements of sperm quality which the Felix device is designed to address.
Thanks, John. Now, we may move on from here. I'm conscious of time, but also that there is a bit to get through. So please keep any other questions in your back pocket ready to go. But I might now pass back to Alison, who will continue with the rest of the presentation, which is looking more now at the pipeline of projects, programs, and research projects that are being developed. And we will stop towards the end of that to answer questions directly related to that, a number of which have come in already, and a number I know are starting to pop up on the screen. So Alison, if I could pass back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, we've got two remaining products to talk through. We've talked about our main one, Felix, but these two are also rising in importance. The first one is now, it's called Rockstar. It was Rosa. Rockstar is, we're seeking the ability to use that name legally. And it's a rapid in vitro antioxidant assay or assessment, if you like. Next. So the use, there's multiple uses, and John Aitken can talk at length about this. So fertility researchers right through to various clinicians, food tech industry, our own internal use, clinician groups, point of care, at-home tests, personalised medicine. Lots and lots of applications, and it's a really, really unique 5-minute test. Keep going. The addressable market, this is a hard one, because it's like almost how big is, how much can you stretch a band? You can make it much bigger than 10 billion. Of course, we've got to get there, but we started with a research market because that's the earliest one that we can access, and that in itself is not something to sneeze at. John knows a lot of these researchers, and he knows that they're dying to have such a device for testing what they're doing. And then we've got the clinicians, the IVF clinics, the food tech industry, and other clinicians, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. We didn't even try to go there. And so we used a bunch of very conservative assumptions to get some sort of fix on potential market size, with tiny ideas of how often these things be used, and you know, what sort of percentage take up might be. And even with these very conservative numbers, you get to a big number at the end of what the market might be. Next. John will talk more about this, but oxidative stress is a serious chemical imbalance in the body, and it's when you've got oxidation being the predominant thing in your body, and it's out of whack with how you're mitigating that, and various ways that this comes about, which you can see on the diagram. People hear about antioxidants and they think, well, that's the fix, but not necessarily. So the next slide shows you could go imbalance on the other way, equally serious. It's called reductive stress, redox reaction, oxidative reduction, oxidation reduction. So, and that can happen too. And when you've got an imbalance either way, it's really, really serious. So the next thing, if you can show the next slide. So all sorts of terrible conditions happen, no matter which side of the balance you're on. You want to be in balance. And John will talk about, people popping antioxidant pills like they think that they're lollies, they can take them ad infinitum. Well, no, you can actually overdose and you can cause all sorts of terrible things to yourself. So, but the point is here that even though these states are very, very serious, there's no easy test to see where you are in that sort of a balance. You don't know until you actually get disease states and think, oh, I've got something wrong, I've got to treat that. But it'd be really great if you had some early intervention. So, next slide. You would like to test for oxidative stress, which is often where these imbalances, if you could show where it is, it's starting in the body where, you could deal with it. Problem is that most times it's not treated, not because it's not assessed, because the way that you assess it at the moment is very, very tricky chemical equipment in a laboratory that takes 24 hours. Here, through a very, very amazing discovery by John, we've got a test that's 5 or 6 minutes, and you can use it in all sorts of different bodily fluids. You can do it at point of care, and it's going to be very competitively priced. And it means ultimately when we have approval for clinicians to use it, they'll be able to have very, very good clinical interventions, right, very, very quickly. Next. Stage of development. Well, John's established proof of concept. There are 4 separate assays. That in itself is unique. I won't go into them at the bottom of the page. They're using the same device structure, and it's really quick. And at the moment, we're developing prototypes that we hope will be able to be produced relatively soon, and we'll bring them to the key opinion leaders, the researchy ones first, for them to test, and that's the next step. So, talking about steps, here's a Gantt chart, and you'll see that there are various activities in all Gantt charts. You have them down the left, you have a timeline along the top, and there are various ways we're going about this. First use will be research market. We should get sales from that research use. John knows a lot of these researchers personally around the world. And then the next part is the clinician kind of use, which has got more regulatory. We know what needs to be done, having gone through that with Felix. It's not as onerous as the process for Felix, but then there are certain things that still have to be done for clinician use to show that it's safe and efficacious. Next. So this is bearing out where we're at and showing the 2 clear paths, where early access is the fertility research market and perhaps the food industry monitoring. You're not going around to people and telling them what disease state they've got and how bad. For those sort of indications, you need to do more regulatory, but there's opportunities along all of these different applications, and they just take different timeframes. Next one. So that's the rock star, and now I'd like to just talk briefly about AI port, which is an entirely different thing, but it's still about reproduction. And you'll see that we've zeroed in on beef cattle to start with. They look like Herefords. And it's to increase the cattle pregnancy rates with artificial insemination. So point is, why do people even use AI when you can have a bull wandering around the field with cows? Point is, you're trying to get really, really good genetics. This is only for high-end breeders who are interested in very special genetics. You think Wagyu, for instance, and the degree of marbling, that's a genetic trait. And so is the amount of weight that they can put on and so forth. So for high-end breeders, they must use AI to improve herd genetics. Later, we could provide this same sort of technology to other species, in particular horses. They have to be non-thoroughbred, of course, because you're not allowed to use AI there, but there's a very great demand for there as well. So next. So what happens currently is that the bull semen is collected, then there's having a look down a microscope and working out count, etc. They put the semen into these vials or straws. they're cryopreserved, and you'll see the far right, the straws coming on out of the liquid nitrogen that they have been preserved or cryopreserved in, and they're pulled out and thawed, and then the contents put into the cow after she's been brought on, ready to receive the semen. The next one is what we're doing, and where it's different. So you still have the collection, but we learned from previous work that we've actually got to take off the seminal plasma, which is in the semen. There's seminal plasma and sperm. We want the sperm. So it's a quick spin, 20 minutes. You get the viable motile sperm. You get a good yield out of that, and you put that into our very special medium, which we have optimized, and it's got some special antioxidant in there that's making an extraordinary difference, and it extends for 4 days, and they're still very, very alive and kicking after 4 days. So the next step, now that we've developed this is proof of concept at the university. We're doing a spring pregnancy field trial in the Hunter. We expect that this will happen early November. We're going to have 2 arms, 150 cows each, one with the current process and the other with our isolated process with our special medium. And the cows will be inseminated, and then we'll look at pregnancy rates. We do expect a higher pregnancy rate with ours, and only a 5% improvement would make a huge economic gain to the farmers. We'll know the results probably in December. So I think that's pretty well much AI port. So if the trial is successful, then we'll manufacture in-house, and then we'll seek to sell in the next breeding season. There are 2 seasons. There's a Southern Hemisphere once a year. It's spring. The Northern Hemisphere is their spring, and they're 6 months apart. And so we'll also be looking to sell into overseas markets, subject to good results. I think that might be it. No, it's a pretty big market. And Australia's, it looks relatively small, but 6% of 2.4 billion is no slouch. But the big one is Brazil. But they're all very, very substantial. As I said, we'll go to the premium genetics breeders, and there's a big prize here if we get this right. So open to questions.
Thanks, Alison. There's a stack here for John, so no pressure, John. We'll jump straight to you if possible. In terms of AI port, is it correct that AI port has already been used and essentially you're now waiting for results?
So yeah, the situation, as Alison explained, is that we have developed and designed and validated a medium for the ambient temperature storage of bovine semen, or sperm in particular. That's already been achieved. We've shown that we can keep them actually for up to a week at ambient temperatures and still have very high levels of motility. And the next step in this whole process is now to do an insemination trial where we compare the results of AI port with the conventional freezing protocols. And that's going to take place in the next month or so. And we should, by December, have the outcome of that particular trial. So if that works, I think we've really opened up an enormous market for the company.
Now, I apologise if I'm confusing some questions, but what happened to the last trial?
So in the last trial, we tried to develop a semen extender. So the difference there is that we still have the seminal plasma in the mixture. You just dilute it and then try to incubate that at ambient temperature for up to about a week or so. And that trial didn't work very well. And what we discovered was that there are toxic elements in seminal plasma that you have to get rid of in order to preserve the sperm cells for long periods of time. So that was the learning there. We've learned from that. We have now developed protocols for the rapid separation of sperm cells. And once they are free of seminal plasma and in our medium, then they will stay alive and viable for days on end, and certainly enough to be able to conduct artificial insemination.
And why do you feel confident that farmers or breeders will use AI port? What's the compelling reason? Is it cheaper, more efficient, faster? If it is faster, by how much? What would compel breeders to use it?
Yes, well, because it doesn't involve freezing and thawing, which damages the sperm cells and certainly places a limit on the efficacy of conventional protocols, cryostorage protocols, because it doesn't involve that, we anticipate that the procedure will be more effective. More of the semen that you inseminate will result in pregnancies. And that, of course, will make a big difference on the ground, as Alison's already explained, to the income of the farmers. So the major gain here is one of efficacy.
And in terms of the number of breeding seasons, it's possible to use the AI port?
Well, there's one breeding season a year, and there's one in the southern hemisphere, one in the northern hemisphere, and they're separated by about 6 months or so. So that would be the opportunities you would have to use this kind of system.
Given your global standing in this space, how closely do people watch what you're doing in this space? Clearly with Felix, there was a lot of eyes watching what you were doing, a lot of interest. Interest, do you think the industry, but also peers and others are watching what you're doing, given how groundbreaking it is?
Well, yes, I think we are under close scrutiny by our peers, but we've been very careful in the management of our intellectual property. We published a lot of papers over the years with the Felix device and its predecessor, the CS10, but we didn't publish anything until we'd established a proper patent position. And that will be true for the pipeline developments that Alison's already indicated. We won't reveal any of the elements of AI port or the principles behind the Rockstar system until we have established a patent position in those areas.
And for AI port, is it just cattle, or can it be used for sheep and other animals?
Yeah, no. Underpinning all of this is what we've done is to use our understanding of sperm cell biology to completely develop or redevelop a medium for the incubation of spermatozoa, which has very little relationship to the media that have been used historically. So this is a totally novel development, and those principles apply across species. So whilst we're trialing cattle first, and we're doing that because but the cattle industry is by far the largest, most lucrative market. The same principles would apply to other species, for example, horse or even sheep. Semen could be extended using these kind of technologies.
And I do have a question here that's just come through that I think David's probably best placed to answer. In terms of regulations, for the AI port, what do the regulations look like in other countries? And have you got that far to determine those answers yet?
Look, David, I think there's regulations for any of these products that are used in any jurisdictions, whether it be human or in animal. Having said that, some of the regulations that govern animals have a slightly lower bar compared to human markets. But, I think that the bar is as low as probably the usage of the animals as well. So if they're animals that are to be used in food production or used in humans, and they may differ slightly. But generally speaking, yes, there are regulations, and those for animals are slightly a lower bar overall and slightly easier. I mean, I've also worked in animal health and in animal health pharma, and conducted a number of clinical trials and field trials to produce data for submission to veterinary regulatory authorities. And I assure you, there's a huge difference between the human and the animal regulations.
Now, this may be a question for John or David, but which countries would be considered early access for Rockstar? Maybe, John, I'll let you have a first crack at it.
Yeah, well, I think as Alison's already said, there's a great deal of interest in this area. We know that oxidative stress is a major cause of infertility, and we know that antioxidants are a potential treatment for male infertility, but we don't know who to give the antioxidants to. And if you give the antioxidants to men who don't have oxidative stress, they go into reductive stress, and you've achieved nothing. So it's a very important area. research in this area is very intense in North America, Northern Europe, and in certain countries in Asia. So those will be the early adopters of this kind of technology. I know a number of laboratories in North America and Northern Europe are waiting for prototypes so that they can put them in their lab and test them. And as we've already described, I think that's the way to market. You influence the key opinion leaders in the area, give them an opportunity to try your technology. And if it is what we say it is, then they will publish positive results, as they have done with Felix, for example. And that will certainly help promote the area.
And David, a bit of a question without notice, like a number of these, but have you thought through, or has the company thought through the revenue model for these type of products?
Look, I think from the information that Alison's already given us and showing us the major markets and you know, their potentials, I think there's a huge market for a start. And certainly I think that you know, even if we captured a proportion of that, you know, Memphasys could bring in, you know, quite a huge revenue. And I think that, I mean, the animal market is huge, David. I mean, the human market is big, but the animal market is also very big. And there's a lot of people who have a really strong interest and passion, you know, with horse breeding, cattle breeding, and you know, all those areas. And I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity for us to leverage what we've got across all of those markets. And I think that they will inevitably generate a lot of revenue for MEM probably in the short term, but more so in the long term. I think that we're well placed, and it's great to see that this company also has a foot in both buckets, because we're working strongly in the human IVF area and also in the animal area. So I kind of feel like you're quite proud that you know, we've got the whole area around IVF covered, and I think we're well positioned.
John might be able to talk about how the different species, the work that we do in human, animal, animal, human, how there are learnings that we use from one to the other.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. Usually it's the animal studies that inform the human, but actually in the case of andrology, it's more the other way around. We've a lot of interest has been focused on human spermatozoa and male infertility. And some of that learnings has now helped inform new technologies for animal reproduction. Certainly a strong exchange of information between the two pools, and at a scientific level, we're very happy to be working with equine sperm, bovine sperm, human sperm, or even the eggs from those species. It doesn't really matter to us. We're just interested in the basic biological and biochemical principles. But those principles help inform technical developments in both the agricultural and veterinary field and the clinical field.
I've got an exceptionally good technical question that's come through. So, John, I'm actually going to read it as it comes through, and I don't get it wrong, so I apologise. Does the packaging system of semen extended for the AI in bovine matter? In straws or vial or other? If in straws, what is the optimum sperm concentration required for successful AI?
Well, we don't know the answer to that yet, because we haven't had the opportunity to do the artificial insemination trials. What I can tell you is that in order to preserve the cells over long periods of time, the nature of the container doesn't really matter. So what's critical here is the development of a medium that will support those cells in a very active motile state at ambient temperature for many days. At the end of the day, whether we package it up into vials or straws, that will be more dependent on ease of use by the farmers who are using the system than by any technical development from our side. So we will listen to them and package it in the way that's most appropriate for their needs. But fundamentally, no, it doesn't matter how it's packaged.
Now, there's a point and a question here in terms of the share prices has declined over the last 12 months, and it's not And it's an obvious thing if you look at the share price, so there's no surprises there. But Alison, what's the key asset or assets that you think will drive positive return? Where do you think the value is coming from?
It's a big question, David. I think if we all only knew, in some ways, we're facing a particularly difficult market. I've been working in financial markets with biotechnology companies for over 20 years. I've never seen it so weirdly tough. And often you have something that you think is remarkable and you put it out and there's no reaction, not much. You wonder sometimes what you got to do. And so I say, well, hey, we might get a great result in AI port. You would think if you get a great result, the market would arc up. But in this market, who knows? Similarly, maybe we get some nice early sales result in Japan. Is that going to be enough for the market? We might get more distribution through Vitrolife or who knows who in other jurisdictions. Is that enough? There's a lot of things happening. I would say the company's never been looking so good internally, and outside it has a different sort of perception. And you know, I'm sort of scratching my head about, you know, what is required apart from hey, if we had suddenly $1 million sales and we were suddenly profitable and we never had to raise money again, I think that would get people's notice. But other than that, or a major deal, we were basically taken out maybe. But I don't, up until those points, I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to work this market out.
So maybe another question that's just come through, slightly different question in regards to the markets. And now often shareholders look at the market as the share market as opposed to the market in which you play and operate. The question I've got here is, while the sector generally, and you could argue Memphasys specifically, is not getting market support from the share market, how much interest is coming from the wider market?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. It's huge. Maybe I'd like to call upon David and Hassan and John, who were all at the recent Aspire conference, and we had a booth there. And David and I were manning the booth most times. And I said to Dave, maybe you need a book. I don't know if anybody's even going to come up to us. Well, we were run off our feet. There were people coming up, talking to us, wanting to do this and that from all sorts of countries. Vitrolife, talked to them multiple times, and clinicians, like it was other majors, I have to say, very interested in what we've got. You know, guys, what would you say?
I think I'll speak at least on the clinical side of things, gauging the interest at the recent conference and also outside of the conference. There is certainly a huge interest in the Felix technology. We have been approached from not only within Australia, but also from outside Australia, Southeast Asia. Multiple countries are actually, or multiple clinics from Southeast Asia are particularly interested in the Felix. And with that, obviously, whilst we understand there are some regulatory hurdles to be passed still, there are other avenues that they're very willing to embrace and explore, such as early access schemes, for example, to be able to use the Felix, you know, as it stands currently, even potentially before the regulatory approvals are passed. Certainly from the diagnostic point of view, there is a huge, coming from obviously a heavy andrology background myself, there is a huge need for a quick, rapid, efficient diagnostic test in the andrology area. I know the clinicians are screaming for it and they want it. It's just it doesn't exist, and we believe we can fill that gap for at least in the fertility area
With Rockstar.
With the Rockstar assay. So on both the Felix and the Rockstar, I think there's huge potential, and I think it's only a matter of time before you see a great impact, which will hopefully also ultimately result in or contribute to your previus question, which is about the share price.
Yes, David, if I can contribute too. I think what people are excited by is novelty. We've been preparing sperm cells for assisted conception the same way since the dawn of time. And it's about time we use some new technology, some 21st century technology to achieve this end. And so people are interested in us because what we represent is something novel and revolutionary. And the same is true for oxidative stress assessments. Again, they have been done for a long period of time with complex biochemical assays that require laboratory personnel and equipment to conduct. We've condensed all that down into a little instrument that will give you a result within 5 minutes if you want to know how much oxidative stress your sample is under, and is applicable to blood, semen, follicular fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, any fluid you care to mention. So the applications are enormous and the technology is novel, and I think that's what gets people excited.
Dave, to you.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I've got to say leverages a little off what John has just said, but in a different context. And I think that in all my time in working with large multinational companies in pharma, and I've been in a lot of stands, David, and a lot of booths in my time. I have never ever been so busy as I have been at Aspire this year, and just the level of interest in not only Felix but our other products was absolutely huge. And for me, it was an extremely stimulating time to have in Adelaide at that conference. But I think the heart of the matter here is that we, as John said, is we've got something different. And when you look at products, for example, in pharmaceuticals or even some other device companies, there's a lot of products that are similar. There's a lot of competition out there for the same thing. But the devices and the products that we have are not me too products. They are predicate products, and they are new, they are novel. And this is why we've got so much interest in what we're doing. And this is why companies like Vitrolife, maybe even Cooper Surgical, they all see gaps within their product portfolios where we can insert pieces of what we do into their portfolios to actually, help them raise revenue and help their profiles as well. And I think that, these are the sorts of things that we bring to the marketplace is differentiation, novelty, innovation, and, the general end user can see that for what it is. And hence we are generating and attracting so much interest from the people that want to use this in the field.
On that note, we have got to the end of our questions. A very comprehensive, as we promised, presentation and a very comprehensive Q&A series. Hopefully everyone garnered and gained a lot of answers to questions, but also a lot more of an update on where the company is, the opportunity being presented, and importantly, the team driving the company forward. So I'd like to thank Alison, David, Hassan, and John for their time. And I'd like to thank everybody for participating today. If people would like to follow up directly with the company, they do have our details. We're more than welcome the opportunity to hear from investors and talk more to investors about what the company is doing and the rapid advancements the company is making. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, and have a great day.